Question. When someone has more than you, how do you feel? Do you feel happy for them, or envious? Another question. If this person has more wealth, while living near them are multiple poor people, is it fair to take a large amount of the person's wealth to help out the poor? These are all relevant questions in our current discourse with rising wealth inequality and perceptions of class warfare. To some, it seems businesses are getting bigger with no one to challenge them, the profits are getting faster, and so do their bellies. It is no wonder some people want to eat the rich.
Like other people, I can't ditch the thought that we should eat the rich.
This perception was reinforced by the higher inflation that occurred after the recovery from COVID and end of lockdowns, with the same large companies being a clear scapegoat. But more moderate voices, let's call them social democrats or Keynesians, don't want to eat the entire rich, or even take all of their wealth. They instead want to tax the rich and corporations large amounts to help with income inequality and wealth distribution. A few even want to use taxation of the rich to help combat inflation. You see, inflation is the phenomenon of the demand of goods outpacing the supply of goods in an economy, and people demand goods through money. But if they have less money, they demand less stuff. This closes the gap between demand and supply, lowering inflation. But if we try and tax the poor, it would be the ultimate insult to injury since they don't have much to tax in the first place, and are dealing with a cost of living crisis driven by, you guessed it, inflation. But when it comes to wealthy people, they have a ton of disposable income, so will have more to spend and demand goods and services. So taxing them will mean they demand less goods and services, which brings down inflation. Simple. For instance, there is a movement that follows something called modern monetary theory. And while I haven't done much research on these guys, I have heard from their proponents that a great tool to deal with inflation is higher taxation, and use a similar line of argument.
Secondly, tax is fundamentally important in MMT. Anybody who says it isn't is wrong. Tax is, inside modern monetary theory, the principal tool used to control inflation. There is no other tool that can do it as well as taxation. Let's be clear about it.
There are a ton of taxes on the rich, like say wealth taxes, which deserve their own video. But for today's video, I thought we would focus on corporate taxes instead. And there's a particular reason why. More recently, Professor Christabel Young of Economic Sociology at Cornell University called for higher taxes on higher earners or corporate profits to curb inflation. Like maybe a tax rate of 37% to 45% on incomes above $1 million. But clarified the new revenue would have to go towards paying down the debt rather than social programs or infrastructure. And we don't need to worry about how corporations and the rich might react to these taxes. After all, when it comes to investing and job creation, corporations usually only factor in market demand and economic booms. So they won't hire more people or spend more in investing without market demand, so taxing them won't hurt job growth. The solution is simple. But is this true? Does raising corporate taxes force rich people to spend less? Does taxing the rich reduce inflation? Well, let's see. One study utilized previous research on exogenous variation in US federal tax policy changes between 1950 and 2006 and decomposed them into personal and corporate tax changes, as well as using 190 subcomponents of the personal consumption expenditure deflator. Oh, and hey, one of the authors is from my alma mater, Queen Mary. Nice touch. As predicted by the progressives, personal income taxes do significantly lower inflation. However, corporate taxes is not associated with lower inflation. I mean, look at those graphs.
Perfection.
In fact, in certain periods, raising corporate taxes raised inflation a bit, I think by close to 1% at its peak. And these two trends were consistent by sector, such as food, durable goods, and capital equipment. Well, this is odd. You know what? Let's try another study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. Using data from the Tax Foundation, University of Michigan Tax Database, and the State Finance chapter of the Book of States, the researchers from this study found the different levels of corporate taxes for American states, as well as utilized their NBER database for some placebo tests. They also had the Nielsen RMS scanner dataset, which gave them access to retail sales in grocery, drug, mass merchandiser, and miscellaneous retail spaces, as well as 12 billion transactions per year worth, on average, $220 billion. So a pretty good sample size for a study. But what did the study find? that there was a net of tax elasticity of 0.24. And what does that mean? That a 1% rise in the corporate tax rate led to a 0.24% rise in retail product prices. Even when individual states increased their corporate taxes, this was still associated with higher prices. Excuse me? This doesn't make any sense. Isn't higher taxes meant to stop people from spending? This logic would make sense, except it doesn't take into account that corporations care about maximizing profit. And tax is a cost that hurts profit. And in a competitive market, if an individual company faces higher costs, they may raise prices to offset that cost. But another company which sells similar goods may be more efficient and not face these higher costs and not raise their prices. So the company would have to face the problem of the consumer going to the other company instead who didn't raise their prices. However, if you raise corporate taxes on a national or state level, then all companies of a certain market then face the same cost. So it wouldn't hurt them to raise prices since they will all be forced to do it anyway, and so the consumer gets the short end of the stick. In fact, there's something in economics called tax incidence, which is the proportion of the overall tax burden that certain groups like consumers and business owners must pay. The researchers used varying tax elasticities to discover that the corporate tax incidence on consumers, workers, and shareholders are respectively 52%, 28%, and 20%. While another estimate showed that the corporate tax incidence on consumers, workers, and firm owners are 43%, 36%, and 21% respectively. So close to half of corporate tax incidence falls on consumers. In layman terms, consumers are the most likely group to be hurt by corporate taxes via higher prices. This indicates that the corporate tax isn't very progressive and is more like a sales tax.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Now, you may be skeptical of this data, but the researchers got you covered on that as well. There are a group of companies called S corporations who only have a personal income tax and not a corporate tax. The companies that have a corporate tax are referred to as C corporations. So if the goods of these S corporations rise at the same amount as these C corporations, then the price rises of retail goods can't be attributed to a rise in corporate taxes. And it turns out that while there was a strong negative relationship between the change in the corporate tax and change in prices, the relationship between changes in prices for S corporations and a change in corporate taxes is not statistically significant. Well, what about the 50 different American states? They have their own economic policies like varying investment tax credits, R&D tax credits, job creation tax credits, and job creation grants. Could the results be attributable to these state factors? Well, when taking these into account, the results still hold. Granted, these price rises also disproportionately affected households on higher incomes and higher priced goods. For instance, the price pass-through from corporate taxes was 30% higher for average income groups at the 75% level versus the median. Also, the effect of price rises was 60% for goods with a price at the 75% level versus medium-priced goods. But these price rises still affected lower income groups and consumers, and corporations are less likely to pass the tax rises through higher prices in more competitive markets. So monopolies are much more likely to raise prices in response to corporate tax rises. Overall, when it comes to raising corporate taxes, the person that usually gets hurt is the consumer through higher prices. Just because corporations might not increase production or hiring unless there is a greater market demand for their services, doesn't mean there won't be consequences for raising taxes. I mean, firm owners and shareholders suffer roughly 20% of the tax, while consumers and workers pay the rest. I'll let you decide whether corporate taxes are fair. But if you don't want the poor to suffer higher prices, a good remedy would have been not to print so much money during COVID. And if you are curious to know why, you can check out this video. As for why I wanted to specifically focus on corporate taxes, you probably have heard of the tariffs that President Trump is enacting on other countries. Progressives have pointed out how these lead to companies raising prices on consumers, and while I am impressed with this line of argumentation, and am disappointed by conservatives denying that tariffs raise prices, leftists are clearly being hypocrites. Same with conservatives. I mean, it is utter lunacy to claim that tariffs will lead to companies passing these costs down to consumers, but that corporate taxes will not lead to companies doing the same thing to consumers as well. Right now, there is an endless supply of progressives with these positions. I really want to delve into corporate taxes, but if you want to know more in the meantime, there are people who have done much better research than me on this stuff, like Trump's tax cuts, such as the political checkmate. So check out his response to David Pakman, who is as annoying and smug there as he was in my video, where he lost his mind. Incidentally, he will be one of the first progressives who will get a response video from me on tariffs and corporate taxes. I of course wasn't the first one to point out this hypocrisy, as Metis Waves did an amazing video breaking down Destiny's economic hypocrisy and even made this lovely meme. I would recommend you check that out, but if you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and commenting, as it really helps my video in the YouTube algorithm, as well as subscribe for more future content. I would love to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which granted I feel is a pretty ambitious goal, but I would be extremely grateful to you guys if you help me reach that goal. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. See you later, and bye.